Hello and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and this month we are joined by State Representative Chris Markey.
How are you?
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
All dressed up today. Look at
I
this, suit and everything. It has been such a busy time. I know that when we get the House feeds from the State House, they send down the sessions and whatever, and Dan's going crazy trying to get them all on the air. It's been a busy time for you folks up there.
Yes and no. It's been busy doing a lot of things that we're not totally familiar with. Just still doing the kind of the downfall or the downhill from the pandemic, but we're still trying to fix some of that stuff as well.
And the sessions are still online as you see them on TV. What they send down, which is, I know you and I have talked about this in the past. That it's tough to be a legislator when you're not having the contact with your colleagues that you normally would have.
Most definitely. I mean, I think you look at it, and I mean, part of it is building up a relationship with the people around and knowing who everybody is and trying to gain support. It's much more difficult through Zoom or through conference calls. So I'm looking forward to the day. I've actually thought we were going to be back in October. Then I thought November 1st. I'm hoping January 1st that we're back in there in person and live and get to see everybody.
We were talking about, the State House is the last State House in the country that hasn't reopened yet. I guess, are you surprised, or is it smart?
I am surprised. I think it's really important, particularly now that we get people to participate in government. There's reasonable means and reasonable limitations we can put on it, but I do think we should be open. I do think the citizens need to be up there to advocate for their positions. I think it's really, really important.
Is it hard for you and your staff to do your jobs with, I mean, I'm not just talking your colleagues, but just secretary positions and departments and what have you?
Yeah, I think it's different because you're not having that contact with people, and it makes getting things done even longer, and that can be frustrating to a lot of people. And I feel like the only way we really communicate with our constituents now is through the phone and email. And I last week we did the Veterans Luncheon in Dartmouth, which we do every year. We had breakfasts this year. We did luncheon, and it was the first time I got to see a lot of people I hadn't seen in a long time.
I was going to say, for your staff, it must be too. I mean, really the only way you're corresponding with, if you need something from Human Services or whatever, transportation, whatever department, it's email. I mean, you're really, because they're not in the office.
Yes, you don't go and visit someone's office and have a chat with them anymore. It's all through email.
Which can be slow.
Or telephone calls.
Yeah. So I know that's on, just for an overview, because I know it's still prevalent news, the COVID pandemic right now that we're dealing with. As you look at the state right now, just your overall assessment, how are we doing? I know numbers, we're worried about a surge now for the fall, late fall and early winter.
Well, it's logical, right? I mean, the weather is getting colder. People are spending more time inside, so the numbers will creep up a little bit. But it's a balance, and that's one of the things that this governor has really done a tremendous job on. Like I say it every time I have an opportunity to say it, is that there's a balance when you're in a crisis of trying to balance out everything. And he has balanced it out, I think, almost perfectly in the way in which you deal with, there's the people who think, the individual rights, why wear a mask, why get vaccinated, I'm not going to die from it, I'm healthy, I'm young. Dealing with all of those people to dealing with the people who are hypervigilant. And that's an incredible amount of stress daily, just on that. But what he did was actually listen to the science, listen to doctors, listen to the experts, and figured out when he can do certain things and when he can't do certain things. And I think it's really done Massachusetts right. I I try to think of really any political decisions he made when it came to that. And I can't think of purely political decisions that were made. And I think when you have someone who's to the far left or to the far right, they're making those decisions based upon those positions, as opposed to really governing in the middle. And that's why I think he's just done a tremendous job.
And the numbers, the folks getting the vaccine, those numbers are up too, slowly but surely. Massachusetts has always been one of the better states in the country that has done a good job of vaccinating its citizens.
Oh, I think we're
3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but I think we're also number one of a population over 5 million people.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just, that's part of the programming, right? I mean, we heard people being upset that the southeastern Mass initially at the beginning of the year didn't have a vaccination site. You knew it was going to happen. There's no reason to get upset about it. But there was a plan, and the plan, I think, really worked well. And we educated enough people to get involved, to try to be influencers, to make sure that people got the vaccinations. And even in the marginalized communities, we have done a tremendous job of getting that. I mean, Chelsea, right? The governor spent a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money to get Chelsea, and Chelsea was one of the best cities to go with the vaccinations.
How do you think down here? Obviously, the southern part of the state has lagged behind the other parts of the state.
I'm disappointed in that. I just think we're not asking people to do a lot. The vaccination works, and I understand there are legitimate medical reasons not to do it. I get that, but those are so rare. That's not 30% of the population. And I think there's 30% of the population that says, I don't want to do it because it's me. Well, when you're a kid, you got vaccinated all the time. We still get vaccinated for certain things. So, I don't know, it's disappointing. I think we can do better. I hope we do better. I hope people actually see it, particularly in the winter, that it's worthwhile.
Right. One of the big news items coming out of Beacon Hill is the redistricting plan for the legislature, for the congressional seats. A lot in the news. Your district has changed a tad. As you were saying, population probably stays about the same, but you've got a greater geographical area of the city than you had before.
Yes.
You're moving a little north, I guess.
I am, and I'm excited about it, actually. I think that there are some issues in the north end that I know that the state is involved in. I know the parallel products is an issue for a lot of the residents, and I'm concerned about that, and I want to make sure that I'm up to speed on that. And I think I am. I've met with the people from Parallel Products. I've been on an email chain that really keeps me informed from the citizens of the north end. I think that they've done a nice job of making sure that they stick together and being advocates. And I also think that Parallel Products needs to rein it in a little bit. I think they're asking for a very large amount of assistance or expanding a little bit more than what we really want up there. We can cut that back a little bit. I think it's a good thing. Again, you got to keep in mind that they're going to create a bunch of jobs and do those things. So it's again going back to that whole, governing in the middle, trying to find a balance, making sure that they abide by certain conditions and rules, and also eliminate some of the things that they desire.
Your district, obviously, you've got all of Dartmouth, and then you've got obviously parts of New Bedford. But it's going to be, from your standpoint, interesting, the challenges you're dealing with a community it's a farm community in some aspects, it's a waterfront community in aspects, but you also have New Bedford where you're dealing with municipal issues. And that's got to be challenging, I guess, in some ways, but exciting in the others, because really two different issues or two different types of communities.
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to the balance stuff, right? Like, maybe a far right person will do much better in the North Dartmouth area where there's more libertarian types who don't want the government involved and all of that. I get that. And I listen to it and I learn from it. And then there's people in New Bedford who need government for the assistance, for the lift to get going. And you need to pay attention to that as well. And you try to find a balance of where it is that you think most of society wants. So I think it keeps me measured. it also is a huge educational experience because you get to listen to these vast opinions of different things, of very simple topics to very elaborate topics.
Right.
That, when you're 54 years old, it's nice to learn new stuff every day.
But imagine too, and I think we've talked about it in the past, even though you represent a portion of New Bedford, really you're representing the whole city in a sense, because the issues that are important in the south end are important to the folks in the north end too.
Yeah, but I say this to people all the time. What happens in New Bedford affects what happens in Dartmouth. I mean, I live in Dartmouth, but my law office is in New Bedford.
Right.
I know of 4 or 5 guys who work on the waterfront who have houses in Dartmouth. They care about New Bedford.
Right.
It's not, I don't think there's ever a time where I actually think, oh my gosh, this will help me in New Bedford, that won't help me in Dartmouth. I look at it as much more regional, and I think it expands really to from Westport all the way to Wareham, where you have that connection to New Bedford. And I think Fall River has it from Westport, maybe even a little of Dartmouth, Freetown, and then out to Seekonk, where Fall River is their centric area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important. If it's important to New Bedford, it's really important to Dartmouth as well.
Coming back to that too, as we talk about the redistricting, the big issue, the congressional districts, and the proposal now calls for Fall River to be joined as one instead of being split in half where it is right now. And Congressman Auchincloss would be the congressman there, and Congressman Keating is still in New Bedford, goes to Dartmouth. Westport too, and he goes all the way to the Cape. I know there are some, and it seems to be pretty divided too. There are some in government that, including our mayor, who would like to see a congressman represent both communities, and you have others. I know the mayor of Fall River likes the proposal. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually testified. I think I was the only guy from New Bedford who actually testified on it, because I feel like there's a middle ground. The middle ground is the status quo. I don't think we lose anything by keeping the status quo. I don't understand why we need to change it. The status quo allows Congressman Keating or the 9th District to represent half of Fall River and all of New Bedford. It also allows Congressman Auchincloss to represent, or the 4th District to represent half of Fall River. So the north end of Fall River is represented by one congressman. The south end of Fall River is represented by a second. And that connection gives their much more influence over the South Coast. And having 2 congressmen representing really the whole area is really a good thing. But you need that connection, that relationship between Fall River and New Bedford, and having one congressman who represents parts of both is really, I think, essential to it. I think it helps us in the end to have someone who, when he's making a decision for New Bedford, he's also thinking about Fall River. And when he's making a decision for Fall River, he's thinking about New Bedford. I think that's really important. I could care less who the next congressman is. I don't care where he's from. It's what they put into it. And I think that when you look at, again, on a practical matter, when you look at it from the 4th District, there are many more votes that come out of the north part of that district than in the south part. Even with the connection of unifying Fall River.
Right.
There's still going to be many more votes from activists in Newton and in Brookline and all the way down. Those towns have people who vote more often than Fall River. But you're getting, if Fall River actually looked at the numbers and saw it, I think they would be happy to see 2 congressmen representing them for the number of people who actually vote.
It's curious, though, because I know the districts are getting bigger. I mean, the population's getting bigger. So it's like 700,000 people, roughly, are in each congressman's district now in Massachusetts. And, I mean, you make the point, I mean, you just kind of said it right now. I mean, issues in Newton are different than the issues in Fall River. I mean, you can make it in Congressman Keating's, too, that on Cape Cod, it's not the same as New Bedford or Fall River. Probably closer, though, I would say.
So I think that that's also part of what my experience being a representative for Dartmouth and New Bedford. It's you can have the 2 extremes, right? You can have Cohasset and Scituate added on to the 9th District, right? You can do that, and those are the more wealthy towns of suburban Boston. They come down, and you don't mind having. You can still have Newton and Needham and Brookline together if that's what they really want. But I still think to have a stronger voice down here, having that connection of one congressman in both is essential. And reasons why: one, South Coast Hospitals stretches from Fall River to Wareham, so you want someone who has that connection. BCC has campuses now throughout the county, but the biggest campus or effects of Fall River and New Bedford. One would be in Auchincloss, one would be in Keatings. We have Dartmouth with UMass Dartmouth. We have transportation issues. We have South Coast Rail. Those are going to need, at some point in time, they're going to be dealing with federal issues that both Fall River and New Bedford are going to benefit from South Coast Rail.
Well, even the Chambers of Commerce, too.
The Chamber of Commerce,
Wareham to
business stuff.
To the border.
We have offshore wind. We have all those things that are going to be common interests for both Fall River and New Bedford. It just makes sense to have someone who is very familiar with it. And I personally think having someone from the 9th is a great position. And then also someone who's got a connection up to Boston, up all the way up to Brookline, basically surrounded by Boston. You would have someone in Fall River with those same concerns. So that's how I feel about it. I just think I feel strongly that the status quo is better. I don't think we need to join everything together, but I also don't think we should be separated.
What do you think? Do you have any inkling as to what's going to happen? I know that they had the testimony and what have you.
I don't think it will change from what the proposal is. I think Fall River will be on its own and New Bedford will be on its own.
As you kind of mentioned about infrastructure just a second ago, I mean, the federal government infrastructure bill is passed. It looks as though Massachusetts, at least on the surface, could get $9 billion. That's a pretty good windfall for infrastructure projects. I know the legislature wants to have some say in what goes on. How is that going to play out? Will you have proposals as members of the legislature? Like, we'd like money to go to X.
Oh, I'm sure we're going to have some influence over that, and that how that money is spent. It's just a matter of how much we do, and also where it's really needed. I mean, one of the things that is mind-boggling to me is there are still towns that don't have broadband.
Right. Western Massachusetts is very.
I know. One of my closest friends is now running for state senator out there, but he's a rep from Peru, Paul Mark, and he talks about that they don't have. He can't just jump on his computer. They dial in, like AOL did in 1997.
Right.
That's what they have. I mean, it's something that we take for granted now, I think, at this point, 20 years into it. They don't even have. So there needs to be that fundamental foundation for commerce. And that's one of the things when I think about infrastructure that's really needed. And the other thing is bridges. I mean, our transportation system can be, we're living, there's a microcosm example of it in Dartmouth. UMass Dartmouth was built all in the same 2-year span. All the buildings are falling apart right now. Not falling apart, but they have the same issues. AC, windows, all the things that need to get. So there's all this deferred maintenance that needs to occur and improvements to it. Well, our highways were the same way. The 50s, we developed highways. And that was the great part about Eisenhower and doing all these things on the interstate highways. So now they're all falling apart. So we need to make sure that we're on schedule to fix those as well. So I'm hoping that happens. And then finally, we need to start to really get people to deal with public transportation. I think that's a huge factor. We need people to rely on that. Clearly they lose some independence from that, but we need to make better investments in public transportation as well.
I know that on the surface, just the bullet points, when you look at that infrastructure plan from the federal government, it is roads and bridges, it is the infrastructure for the internet that you're talking about. I know rails, huge sum of money going just to rail and ports, which, I mean, when you look at it, everything's down here is impacted by that. I don't know if there's money to be had for that, but it seems as though the four things that they're looking at certainly play well down here.
The ports is a big issue for down here, because our commerce center is really the waterfront of New Bedford. It goes from Wareham to Taunton to Fall River. I mean, New Bedford waterfront is really, that goes away. The economy down here just goes down. I mean, we've seen it with the fishing regulations, how much that affects the economy. But now take away all these other things that are potentials. If we don't have deep water ports, New Bedford allows for that. It's a safe port to be in. It has all the accommodations that people need. So they're willing to invest all this money into it. And I see that happening. So it still needs more investment. So I'm hoping that that's one of the things that is taken care of with the infrastructure. But I still think that the bridges are a huge part. I mean, I think I said this back when I first ran in 2010, is, government has three fundamental purposes, really. Very fundamental is, one is education, because if you don't have an educated citizenry, you can't run a government and you can't have people participate. Two is you need good infrastructure, and the government needs to provide good infrastructure so businesses can grow. Trucks need to drive, people need to be moving in order for the economy to grow. And fourth is you need public safety, and you need to have people feel safe and businesses feel safe where they're investing their money. And if you have those three things, you're going to do well in what we have as a democratic, capitalistic society. But if you don't have that, and you're missing one of them, you're not reaching your potential.
So you're optimistic, I guess, with the bill too, that there's going to be improvements made in general to the state, but hopefully down here as well.
Yes. I mean, you look at just Rep. Cabral is a staunch advocate for New Bedford and all things New Bedford. Hendricks is growing into it and is doing a great job doing that. Strauss has the ability to do those things through his chairmanship of transportation. And Paul Schmidt, who's still in New Bedford and will stay in New Bedford, is a huge advocate for New Bedford and one of the big advocates for tourism and things like that in the area, and he's a huge advocate for it. And you got Senator Montigny, who again is one of the strongest voices up there advocating for those things. So I can't imagine us not getting stuff.
Is it hard though when you and your colleagues are all looking? There's one pot of money and there's a certain amount. I mean, you're all trying to get a piece of the pie. Is that a difficult part? And in a sense, you're going up against Boston too, where
but everyone's doing that. Right. You're all competing against each other. That's why you want $2 million, but you might get 800,000. You can't complain about the 800,000. You get what you get. So I think everyone understands that. You don't get to win a shutout every game. We're not like your son in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. The ARPA money's different. That's coming down the pike, and I know the legislature's looking at that as well.
Yep.
Separate pot of money, and for different issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more. There's a lot of climate money in that, and the infrastructure issues that are there.
So wind energy could be a part of that then.
It is going to be a part of it. It absolutely is.
I mean, I haven't seen any proposals per se, but you're optimistic that that's in there.
Yeah. It is. We've done a lot of that already. We've done the ARPA, and we're talking about real investments in the ports that are going to be affecting the offshore wind.
When do you expect final version of that to be announced or passed?
I would think that I think it could be within the next month.
Really?
That's all done. Yeah.
Good.
With the governor's office.
One of the things that you and I were talking off camera, which I thought was just an interesting thing, is that totally off from transportation and what have you, but was the marijuana impaired driving bill that the governor refiled. And I know it's been an issue, and I was talking to my brother, who was a police officer, and I guess I understood it, but I didn't understand how complex the issue is in that, there is no way really to prove that if you were involved in an incident, that you were under the influence of marijuana. And that's got to be frustrating it's certainly frustrating, it seems, from the law enforcement standpoint.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be something addressed, but I think technology is going to catch up with it. This is when I put on my lawyer hat, once as a prosecutor, now as a defense attorney. But I can say that in operating under the influence of alcohol cases, you have a breathalyzer that you're given an opportunity to take. Now, there were some scientific issues with that for a period of time over the last decade where a lot of them were thrown out because of the science behind it, but I think they figured that out. I suspect at some point technology will catch up and they will be able to detect those types of things in a biological way from some type of test that's given and done by the police. I just don't know how it will go. I don't know the technology part of it, but I do know that the prosecutors are having a very difficult time trying to prove those cases right now. And I think any law that assists us in that, in the public safety issue, is a good thing. But yeah, I can smell it all the time when I'm walking across the street and a car goes by and just smell the weed.
You got a couple minutes left. I want to give you a chance. I know with other things that are going on. What are some of the things that you're working on right now?
One of the things that I want to really see happen is to try to create home ownership, and people who can't afford a home, but they can't afford a down payment. They're paying $1,500 a month in rent. They could buy a house. They could probably get their mortgage down to $900, $1,000, and I think personally that that's the reason why we don't have a middle class, because that's where we create our wealth. I'm sending my kids through school because I have a house and I can borrow from it and I can pay it back. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have that equity. I wouldn't have that savings. I wouldn't be able to do that. And I think of real generational wealth is created first by having a home. And there's a lot of people who could afford a home that just can't afford a down payment. And one of the things that I think is really important is kind of workforce housing, where if it's 60 to 120% of the area median income, you would qualify, not for low-income individuals, but for first-time home buyers. Mm-hmm. Give you up to $15,000 on a down payment or $10,000 on a down payment. You keep it. You keep the house, you keep up to date on everything, no foreclosures, no back rent, no back on the mortgage. It's forgiven after 10 or 15 years, and you can work on the numbers, but if you sell it in that time, we get the nonprofit that would run it would get the money back. I think that's the way to create wealth, really, that we've lost.
And there's so much housing issues right now.
There's zoning issues that could prevent that in some of these smaller towns where you need 200 feet of frontage. You can't build a reasonably priced house, and they keep people out. So we've got to think about those things and really give incentives to the towns to allow them to happen. And again, we do have home ownership programs, but you got to be really poor and from a poor city to be able to do it. You can't be a first-time home buyer in Acushnet. You're not going to be able to get those programs. Or in Freetown, or in Westport, or Dartmouth, or Fairhaven. It's not happening. So,
do you find there's interest in the legislature to pass something?
I think
like that?
there is. I think the governor has expressed interest in it. I think we have put something towards it, but we seem to focus more on the lower income people. But I think of the people who can actually have a good job, but just can't save $20,000 in a reasonable amount of time to put in a down payment.
Right.
Because you save it, right? I mean, just an example is, okay, you're 25, 26 years old, you rent for a couple of years, you buy a house, or you can't afford a house, you just can't get over the hurdle. The next thing you know is you're 27, you have a kid, it takes you 10 years to get to 20 grand, and now your kid is going off to high school. Maybe you want him to go to a private school, or maybe you wanted him to go to a Catholic elementary school. Then all of a sudden there's college. So now you got to worry about college. So all of those things, if you have a house and you can assist in someone getting a house, that's just constant growing. It's always going to grow. And it's a way to get that done.
It's good seeing you.
Nice
Lots
to see
covered
you.
today.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
it.
me. Look forward to you in 3 months or
Exactly.
4 months.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. State Representative Chris Markey, our guest. I'm Jim Marshall. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.